Hello Yu-Gi-Oh players and welcome to Yu-Gi-Oh! Business Casual. I'm your host, the RJBZO. Today I am coming at you with a bit of a random rant. It doesn't have a whole lot of player substance to it. It's just kind of me going on about things that aren't actually all that important to the game. Anyway, the point I want to make toward you guys today is that Yu-Gi-Oh! Players rival Homestucks as the biggest hipsters on the internet. Now, a lot of billions of Yu-Gi Bro heads are exploding as I say that. Like, every time you call a Yu-Gi-Oh player a hipster, somebody burns a Dark Magician Girl or something. But if you really think about it, it's pretty much undeniable. Wow, my color is curling in weird ways. Anyway, it's pretty much undeniable. My story starts with Dragon Rulers. Actually, it pretty much consists of Dragon Rulers. I started noticing this in about mid-October, in which, well, I'll kind of go through the timeline. So things are nearing the September format, and people are seeing how Konami hit Dragon Rulers. If I can ever get proper words out of my mouth, I can get this rant through properly. Hopefully make it a little less than 10 minutes for you guys. Anyway, back to me being on track. Anyway, so September's rolling around. People are like, oh, hey, Konami hit Dragon Rulers. We're all okay. We can finally beat them. And then out of the woodwork come the Yu-Gi-Oh! Hipsters, who always seem to show up constantly, and that would be my cell phone messaging me. Anyway, they always seem to show up toward the end of a format where they're like, no, wait, you guys have no idea what you're dealing with. They're these Dragon Plant things. You guys have never seen them. They put out like level 8 synchros like crazy, and everybody's like, no, you guys are stupid. Because obviously, now that we say so, Dragon Rulers are dead. Now, of course, it wasn't long before everybody turned sides, and the reason was because people started, or like the famous people, the like Robbie Coles and Cordero Spencers of the world started talking about it like, whoa, y'all need to calm your shit. Anyway, so Dragon Rulers roll around. That was an interesting Freudian slip. I suppose it's appropriate since the September format rolls around. People were like, oh, there's actually a ton of diversity in the format, which I'll get to later. There's an entire hipster rant about talking about diversity that I am saving for the end of this video. And people are like, oh, Dragon Rulers are back, but that's pretty cool. They look like a lot of fun to play. So a lot of people are playing Dragon Rulers, and it's kind of cool. It's nice. There's diversity in the format. People are, there are a lot of things like Mermails are doing well, and Infernities are even seeing some play. Blackwings are really big, which are like the ultimate hipster deck for Yu-Gi-Oh players. And like, everybody's cool. It's a great format. And then Dragon Rulers start to get better, and suddenly people start being less okay with it. And the deal is, like, before, like, Yu-Gi-Oh players switch depending on like their interests. Like, a lot of the time, like when their favorite deck is doing well, you're like, dudes, Yu-Gi-Oh players are like, dudes, go with what's competitive. If you want to win tournaments, that's what you're gonna have to do. And if you want to be dumb and casual, then you don't have to play this deck that I've loved all my life. And obviously, I've been a competitive player this entire time, because before this deck got, all the cards that are absolutely vital to its play, I've been playing it on a local level, and I've been doing well with it. And then, like, so that's a level of hipster in and of itself. And then Dragon Rulers became basically the tier 0, and people completely flipped. Like, they stopped saying that if you want to be competitive, you might as well try and play against mirror matches, since that's a skillful thing, and we'll get to diversity again later. But the real thing that bothered me was the fact that suddenly people, instead of being like, oh, Dragon Rulers, those are cool, they're playing cool techs, it's a cool deck, it's a lot of fun, they're like, oh, another Dragon Ruler deck, how unoriginal. You must be such a great player if you can win with Dragon Rulers. When a lot of people don't realize that if there's a tier 0 deck, in order to win with it, it isn't just like an auto win. You can't just play Dragon Rulers in this current format and immediately win. You know why? Because a lot of people are playing Dragon Rulers. So you're going to be fighting against the mirror matches, and those suck. I mean, if you're bad player, they suck. If you're a skillful player, they're perfectly fine. They're basically the essence of this game. Once again, we'll get to diversity in the format later. But suddenly people are flipping out, and they're like, oh, I don't want to see any more Dragon Rulers. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is boring now because Dragon Rulers are good. And it's like, oh my god. You guys sound like I don't know, do you guys understand this? Like, I live near Portland, which is like the hipster capital of the world, and this is the kind of way that people talk about, like, clothing styles. Like, so when a clothing style is trending, like, I don't know, I suppose hipsters don't know a whole lot about clothing styles anyway, based on the way that they dress. Anyway, but, like, I don't know, when beanies come into style, hipsters always start complaining about how, oh, you're wearing a beanie, you're so original, you've got such great style, and they're so sarcastic about it, and that's exactly how Yu-Gi-Oh! Players talk about Dragon Rulers. So now, we get to the January 2014 format being released, and something really weird happens. People declare Dragon Rulers are dead. We're good. We don't need to worry about them anymore. And then somebody's like, hey, Dragon Rulers aren't quite dead. I made this cruddy, like, Blue Eyes, White Stone of Legend, mythic Dragon Ruler thing that can, like, out of all the 2014 tournaments that have happened so far, there have been a few of them that have been recorded, like, one of that deck has won. And suddenly people are all over it. They're playing Dragon Rulers like it's going out of style. Like, well, because it is going out of style, because now it's suddenly a bad deck. And, like, the second people say it's dead, the second it is no longer cool to run Dragon Rulers, the second it is no longer, like, Dragon Rulers are no longer a good deck, everybody suddenly wants to play them. And I'm like, you guys had an entire format in which to play Dragon Rulers. In fact, you had 2 entire formats in which to play Dragon Rulers, when they were fun, when they took, like, teching skills, when they were, like, actually an entertaining deck to play, and they took creativity in-game, not necessarily like making the deck, but in order to make the right plays at the right times, you had to be able to think ahead and do stuff. Like, they were the perfect deck for mirror matches, except for, like, return. But other than, like, you guys know what I'm saying. You had your format in which Dragon Rulers were actually kind of fun to play, and now that Dragon Rulers have gotten to zone, the autopilot zone, suddenly everybody absolutely loves them. Even though, like, really, I've tested the new deck out. It is the most boring deck I've played since, I don't know. I'm not sure that I can compare them quite to 2012 Inzectors. But, like, you guys know what I'm saying. They're really boring to play now. So, I don't understand that. So, Yu-Gi-Oh! Players only seem to really like something when it is not cool. And then when their deck that they've been playing with, when, it was bad, suddenly gets good, then they're like, oh, they've been competitive this whole time. And the other thing is that as soon as a famous Yu-Gi-Tuber says something about a deck, everybody is all over it. Like, the times... Like, when Mega Capital G, this isn't necessarily about a deck, but when Capital G was talking about, like, Pot of Greed coming out, everybody was like, or at least the vast majority of people suddenly flip on Pot of Greed. They're like, oh, of course, Pot of Greed isn't that broken. There's nothing big to Pot of Greed. It's just a free +1 for no cost. It takes absolutely no skill to play, and you basically play as soon as you get it. And the only thing that really stops is, like, Magic Drain or Spell Counselor, which, everybody runs anyway, right? But, suddenly people are like, oh, of course, this entire time I've thought that Pot of Greed should be unbanned, and, like, the ban list comes out and they're like, oh, this Mega Capital G was dumb. Of course we all knew that Pot of Greed wasn't going to come back to 1. It's just, like, if Robbie Cole announced that, like, Reptilians were the next big deck, like, people are way underestimating Reptilians, that they're going to be tier 1 and that this Fire Fist crap is never going to make it. Everybody will suddenly come out of the woodwork being like, dude, I've been beating Dragon Rulers at locals with Reptilians for, like, the last 3 months. I don't know what everybody else has been playing. And that's the other thing. Like, the people who, like, when there's a tier 0 deck and they're like, if you can't beat Dragon Rulers, stop playing the game. Like, oh my god. It's a good deck. Y'all don't need to act so macho about it. Anyway, so then we get to things like diversity in the format, and this is where things get really weird for players, because supposedly Yu-Gi-Oh! Players in the online community really like diverse formats. We're like, yeah, we like to see a lot of variety. And of course, a lot of these players aren't people who play competitively. They just like check out Shriek and they're like, oh, that's a cool variety of things. It makes it an interesting spectator sport, I suppose, when there's a lot of variety, and it makes it more likely that the players who have been playing other decks, who like to play oddball decks, they can do better, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. But then there are people. Then it comes to the time when people are actually playing competitively, and suddenly they're like, wow, I wish we were in a tier 0 format, because now anything could win. Nobody, you know, and no self-respecting Yu-Gi-Oh player would try and play competitively at this time, because, any tier 2 deck that's suddenly tier 1, because there isn't really a tier 1, could win at this point. So obviously the game takes no skill, and since you can't side deck properly, this game's no fun. So I'm just going to play the best deck, and obviously everybody else should be playing it, because clearly my opinion is the best one. And then suddenly a tier 0 format rolls around, they're complaining constantly about the lack of variety, and they totally forget about the skill aspect of the mirror match until a famous Yugi tuber comes out and they're like, okay guys, mirror matches take skill, so stop complaining. Then everybody's like, of course mirror matches take skill. I've been saying that the whole time. And then, there's YugiTube itself. YugiTube itself has this crazy hipster complex going on that, everybody does these things that they think are original that really aren't. And they think they're very cool. Take, for instance, the majority of openings for Yu-Gi-Oh! Various YugiTube channels, videos, they almost always have this, list of things that you can see if you watch their channel. And I kid you not, every single one of the things I'm about to list is on every single one of those openings. Pack openings, deck lists, discussions, duels. Every single one of them says those 4 things. You don't need to say them. If you're on a YugiTube channel, chances are you're looking for pack openings, duels, deck profiles, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Discussions. What else are you supposed to show? And these people are always like, oh, I got this. This is the coolest opening in the world. And then, when they do certain things, their sign-ins, what's the really common one? There's, a really common one that's been going around ever since Jarrell Winston coined it, which is what's good, Yu-Gi-Oh! YouTube? It's your boy blank and blank, and it's always something like a card name and then, 3 numbers afterward, and they think they're so cool for having that card name or whatever. And it just blows my mind how hipster Yu-Gi-Oh! Players can be. Anyway, so that's my ragging on my community of bros. I love you guys, you're awesome. Not in that kind of way. Anyway, but I make this rant out of goodwill towards my fellows that you may be less of hipsters. Unless you're actually a hipster in real life, in which case I kind of feel like that makes it okay, to a degree. Depends on the kind of hipster you are. My girlfriend's a hipster, so I can rag on them, I think. I don't know. Depends on where I'm sleeping tonight. Anyway, so in my own totally unoriginal sign-off, I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, let me know in the comment section below. And then subscribe for more Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck list analysis, deck list discussion analysis, and general Yu-Gi-Oh! Shenanigans. Meanwhile, thank you guys for watching Yu-Gi-Oh! And Business Casual. I'm your host, the RJB0. And, oh yeah, this is the other one, the comment, rate, subscribe thing. That gets on my nerves. Anyway, I got a jet. See you guys.